when we eat something, we must eat that kind of food which in terms of species is furthest away from us. If you eat something which is closer to your genetic, the complexity of that genetic code and its biome and everything doesn't work for us. It'll complicate your own genetic codes, it'll get mixed up, and now everybody is talking about epigenetics.
What you're saying is essentially just another non-scientific version of that same story, that what you just said, but it fits exactly that.
One thing I want to ask you, sir, how, in what way is the biome connected to this? See, how we see food is, we see that when we eat something, we must eat that kind of food which in terms of species is furthest away from us. So, plant life is definitely far away from us. If at all, if you must eat non-vegetarian or something which is not of, from plant life, you can eat fish. Fish, that's why we call it as… in South India we call it as Jalapushpam. This means it's the flower in the water. Because it behaves like plant life in your body, because it's so further away from your own genetic code. If you eat something which is closer to your genetic code, for example, like mammals, if you eat a mammal which is so close to you, the complexity of that genetic code and its biome and everything doesn't work for us. This is a fundamental thing, that it'll dull your system, it'll complicate your own genetic codes, it'll get mixed up, and now everybody is talking about epigenetics. I mean, that's not my area, I don't know scientific knowledge, but we know what causes dullness in us, what causes alertness in us, what lowers our perception, what heightens our perception. This is something we're always conscious about. Before we put something, we're always looking in terms of not protein, vitamin like this, we are only thinking in terms of if I consume this, will I become less receptive or more receptive? This is the only concern we have. Because in this life, whether you live for 100 years or 50 years, how receptive you are is how profound your life's experience is. So, we are not looking at the length of our experience, but the profoundness of our experience. How alert you are, how focused you are, only to that extent everything yields to you in this world, isn't it so? What is the level of focus will determine whether the world yields to you or not, isn't it? And one more aspect of life, one more aspect of food is, when you consume something, it must be of a simple genetic code, in the sense, it must be a very simple software. Vegetables, fruits, nuts, sprouts, they're very simple. More complicated means animal food becomes more and more complicated. Suppose you eat an animal which has some amount of emotion and a life of its own. Now the code in that… we were talking about this, your body is just an accumulation of memory, which means a certain software, isn't it? This is the most complex software. Human software is the most complex software on the planet of all the creatures. So if you eat an animal, particularly a mammal, if you eat, it has a similar kind of complexity, maybe not as complex as this, similar level of complexity because it has thought and emotion of its own. Now for you to break that code and integrate it into your system, you are not fully successful. So it will leave traces of certain qualities within you. You cannot break that code and make it a part of yours because it's a different and complex code. If you eat a leaf, a vegetable, a fruit, a nut or a sprout, this is much simpler. If you must eat non-vegetarian food, you must eat that which is furthest away from you. So generally, fish and water life is furthest away from you. So in this concern, we are seeing that what we consume must be far away from us in genetic code. Does this have something to do with biome?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I always say the best thing that you can do for your health in terms of eating is to eat what your microbes thrive on, and that's essentially… it's largely plant-based food, mainly because of the fiber molecules that only the microbes can break down, and these polyphenol molecules and some of the micronutrients. So what you're saying is essentially just another non-scientific version of that same story, that we have this ancient life form. These microbes have been around for 3.5 billion years on the planet, and they thrive best on the kind of food items that are far away from our own, mammalian evolutionary step. I've actually never thought about this, like what you just said, but it fits exactly that.
That's great.
Foods that are far from us in evolutionary system are generally all plant-based foods like vegetables, fruits, nuts, grains. These are good for our system. Foods that are closer to us in evolutionary system are all types of non-vegetarian food. Especially the meat of mammal is closest to us in evolutionary system. So we should avoid eating these types of food.